I used to walk home the same way every night. Same streetlights, same cracked sidewalk. I could have done it with my eyes closed. There is this thing about routines. They make you stop looking. The air had that late October bite to it. Dry leaves scraping along the curb, as they always did. Nothing about that night felt different. Not at first. And then, one night, a woman stopped me under a streetlight and asked me a question I honestly still haven't been able to answer. She asked me, "Am I pretty?" I gave her an answer. I want to tell you what that answer cost me. But first, let me tell you about the walk itself, because that's the part that used to feel safe. This is the story of Kuchisake-Onna, adapted from the Japanese folktale of the slit-mouthed woman who asks, "Am I pretty?" A few years ago, I lived alone in a small apartment above a laundromat, in a town small enough that everyone recognized everyone's car. I worked evenings at a little bookstore downtown, the kind with a bell over the door and a cat that slept in the window. My shift ended at 9. The walk home took about 20 minutes, mostly along a quiet street lined with maple trees, past a church, past a closed-down flower shop, and then up the hill to my building. I liked that walk. It was one of those small, unremarkable comforts you don't think about until it's gone. The rain in that town came softly, almost apologetically, most autumn nights. I'd walk with my hood up, listening to it tap on the leaves, thinking about nothing in particular. Grocery lists, a book I was halfway through, whether I'd left the stove on. Ordinary things. I mention all this because I want you to understand how normal my life was. Nothing about it should have prepared me for what came next. And for the first few weeks of that autumn, nothing did. It was just an ordinary Tuesday when I first saw her. She was standing near the flower shop, just standing there, facing the window, like she was looking at something inside, even though the shop had been closed for over a year and the window was papered over from the inside. She wore a long coat, the kind that goes out of style and comes back every so often, and a pale surgical mask over the lower half of her face. That part didn't strike me as strange at the time. Lots of people wore them that season. Allergies, colds, the usual reasons. I only noticed her because she didn't move, not even a little. Most people shift their weight, check their phones, glance around. She just stood, facing that papered-over glass, completely still. I remember thinking, maybe she's waiting for a ride. That was the whole thought, nothing more. I kept walking, and by the time I reached the corner, she was gone from view. And so was the thought. I didn't think about her again until the following week. The second time, she was closer to my building. Same coat, same mask, standing beneath the streetlight 2 doors down from the laundromat, at an hour when that street is usually empty. 9:40, maybe later. I told myself it was a coincidence. People walk the same routes I do. It's a small town. But something about the stillness bothered me more this time. She wasn't looking at anything. Not a phone, not a window, not even the road. Just standing, facing the direction I was walking from, as though she already knew which way I'd come. I crossed the street to avoid passing too close. I felt a little foolish doing it, but I did it anyway. A few nights later, my landlord mentioned, almost in passing, that a woman had knocked on the building's front door, asking if a young man lived there. Described me, more or less. Dark coat, bookstore job, apartment above the laundromat. My landlord hadn't thought much of it, figured it was a friend of mine or someone from a mailing list. I didn't have a friend who dressed like that. I didn't tell him that. That night, I took a different route home. Longer. Past the church instead of the flower shop. It added maybe 5 extra minutes. She was standing outside the church. I don't know how. I didn't tell anyone which way I'd be walking. I hadn't even decided until I left the store. But there she was. Same coat, same mask, standing beneath the one working street lamp on that block. And this time, as I passed on the opposite sidewalk, she turned her head to follow me. Just her head. Nothing else moved. I started asking around after that, quietly, the way you do when you're worried people will think you're being paranoid. Nobody else on my street had seen her. Not the woman at the corner store, not my neighbor who smokes on his balcony most nights and notices everything. Except for one person, an old man who ran the newsstand near the bookstore. When I described her, he went very quiet. Then he asked me, careful and slow, whether she'd said anything to me yet. I said no, not yet. He told me that if she ever spoke to me, I should say she was pretty. Just that. Nothing else. Don't hesitate. And don't say anything more than that. No matter what. I asked him why. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something I didn't understand at the time. He said, "Because you don't want to see what's under the mask twice." I laughed it off. I thought maybe it was some local superstition, an old story parents used to keep kids from wandering after dark. I didn't ask him to explain further. I wish I had. For about a week after that, nothing happened. I almost let myself relax. I told myself it had been a strange stretch of coincidences, nothing more, and that the old man's warning was just small-town folklore attaching itself to my own nerves. I went back to my usual route. The maples had started dropping their leaves, and the sidewalk was slick and gold in the streetlight. I remember feeling, for a night or two, almost peaceful again. Then came the night she spoke. It was raining lightly. I just passed the flower shop when I heard footsteps behind me, matching my pace exactly. Not faster, not slower. Exactly. I turned, and she was there. Close. Closer than the streetlight distances I'd seen her at before. Close enough that I could see her eyes above the mask, and they weren't looking at me so much as through me. Patient. Waiting. "Am I pretty?" Her voice was soft, almost gentle. The kind of voice you'd use to ask someone if they wanted tea. I remembered the newsstand man's words. Say yes. Nothing else. So I made myself hold still, and I said it, quiet and steady as I could manage. Yes. For a moment, nothing happened. The rain kept falling. She kept looking at me, and I let myself believe just for a second that it was over. Then, slowly, with 2 fingers, she hooked the edge of her mask and drew it down. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because I've thought about it a lot since, and I still don't have good words for it. Her mouth wasn't a mouth anymore. It reached back, past where a mouth should end, all the way toward her ears in a wide, deliberate line. The kind of thing that doesn't happen by accident. And the strangest part, the part that still catches in my chest at night, is that she was smiling with it. Calmly. Like she'd shown me before to plenty of people, and always got the same reaction. And she was waiting patiently for mine. "Still pretty?" I said yes again. I didn't trust my voice, but I said it anyway, and I didn't look away, because some instinct deeper than fear told me that looking away would be the wrong thing to do, worse than anything I could imagine looking at. She held there a moment longer, watching me. Then, slowly, she drew the mask back up over that impossible smile, and she said very softly, almost like a kindness, "Good." And she turned and walked back into the dark between the streetlights and didn't look back. I don't remember climbing the stairs to my apartment. I remember locking the door and standing with my back against it, listening. There were no footsteps outside, no knock, just my own breathing and the rain against the window, and a silence that felt like it was waiting for me to make the first sound. I moved out about a month later, told my landlord it was for a job, which wasn't entirely a lie. I did find work in a different town, further from any street with maple trees or closed flower shops. I never saw her again. Not on any street, not in any window, not once in the years since. I went back to the newsstand once before I left to thank the old man. He wasn't there. The woman who'd taken over the stand told me he'd retired suddenly, without much explanation, not long after I'd last spoken to him. She didn't know where he'd gone. Nobody seemed to. I still think about what he said, about not wanting to see what's under the mask twice. I've wondered since whether that meant something for the people who answer wrong, or whether it meant something else entirely. Something about the ones who answer right, and what's asked of them the second time they meet her. I don't have an answer for that. I hope I never find out. Sometimes, on quiet streets, in towns that aren't mine, I still hear footsteps that match my pace exactly. I never turn around right away anymore. I count to 5 first. If they stop when I stop, I keep walking, faster, and I don't look at reflections in shop windows until I'm sure I'm alone. And some mornings, when I catch my own face in the bathroom mirror, still half asleep, I find myself looking a little too long at the corners of my mouth. Just checking. It's probably nothing. If you ever hear a soft voice behind you on an empty street, asking something simple, something that sounds almost kind, just say yes and don't look away, no matter what. Get some rest. I'll be here next time with something else.